Stand up.
Hello, my friends. Yes, it is. It is a Thursday. That's right. It's time for the Stand Up with Pete Dominic Happy Hour Hangout, 8 p.m. East tonight. I hope to see you there. It's going to be a fun one, that I can promise you. Also, today's show is very good. Wajahat Ali joins me. Our conversation begins at 34 minutes. It's real good. We cover a lot of ground. Also, I've got my 4-minute interview with the Democratic Senate candidate from Florida, the former Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, and I talked on Friday in Orlando, Florida at the Florida Education Association annual convention. But first, as always, I've got your headlines and clips and a whole bunch of them. So let's jump right in. Reminder, I cannot do it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Get that paid subscription. Sign up. Pay more if you can, if you're getting a lot out of it. Thank you so much for supporting my work. I hope to see you guys tonight. All right, let's get to those headlines, shall we? There are 40 days left until Election Day. I'll be headed back out on the road and give you a plan very soon. Looking to go to Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona still, trying to make it happen, and I will give you those updates. The big news last night was that New York City Mayor Eric Adams has been indicted on federal criminal charges, according to people with knowledge of the matter, and will be the first mayor in modern New York City history to be charged while in office. The indictment is sealed. It's unclear what charges Mr. Adams, a Democrat, will face or when he will surrender to the authorities. Federal prosecutors are expected to announce the details of the indictment on Thursday. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweets, I do not see how Mayor Adams can continue to govern New York City. The flood of resignations and vacancies are threatening government function. Non-stop investigations will make it impossible to recruit and retain a qualified administration for the good of the city. He should resign. And guess what? She tweeted that before the indictment was announced. Maybe she knew it was coming. Either way, the mayor, in his own defense, is claiming he's being persecuted by the federal government for speaking about the city's migrant crisis. Yeah, I don't think that's it. I don't think that the Department of Justice is doing this for that reason. I think they investigated him and many of his cohorts, and there's a lot of smoke and probably a big old fire. I'm going to try to take a deep dive into that over the weekend to find out what it's all about, but it's not national news, and there is so much more to talk about. President Biden was on The View yesterday. He said all-out war is possible in the Middle East, acknowledging the limits of his own persistent diplomatic efforts at achieving a ceasefire deal. He said, I'm using every bit of energy with my team to get a ceasefire in a live in-studio interview on ABC's The View. He said, I think there's also the opportunity still in play to have a settlement that could fundamentally change the whole region. He's being very optimistic on The View yesterday. Vice President Kamala Harris made a broad economic pitch in Pittsburgh, casting herself as a pro-business pragmatist. I'll get clips for you on that and her interview with Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC, which seemed to go pretty well. I thought she was really impressive in both the speech and the interview, which I watched. Also, Vice President Kamala Harris announced that she's going to be visiting the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona on Friday as her campaign tries to, as Politico says, turn the larger issue of immigration from a liability into a strength and hopes to counter a line of frequent searing political attacks from the disgraced former president. Those are my words. Her campaign announced today that Harris will be in Douglas, Arizona, across the border from Agua Prieta, Mexico, on Friday. Let's go to the Middle East, where the Israeli military's chief of staff told troops that today's barrage of airstrikes was in preparation for a possible ground offensive in Lebanon. The IDF had earlier said it was calling up 2 reserve brigades to the northern border as the United States and others are urged against an expansion of its conflict with Hezbollah. The New York Times says American diplomats are working to convince senior Israeli and Hezbollah officials to stand down before their rapidly escalating conflict turns into a wider regional war. U.S. officials hope that finding a way to step back from a war with Hezbollah could put pressure on Yanwar Sinwar, Hamas's leader, to agree to a deal that would end the fighting in Gaza and lead to the release of the remaining hostages. This diplomatic push comes amid signs that the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel is heating up. Well, that's an understatement. Hezbollah fired a missile today at Tel Aviv for the first time, and a top Israeli military leader told soldiers, as I said, to prepare for a ground incursion. Israel continued its barrage of attacks, killing at least 51 people since this morning, the Lebanese health minister said. In related news, Israeli bulldozers tore up miles of streets and destroyed businesses in the West Bank during Israel's latest raid. It is touch and go every day, getting worse day by day, especially now for Lebanese people in southern Lebanon. Now, here's a hard pivot to another terrible story, but remember, that's what the news is. I want to remind you some way every day as I go through the headlines. It sounds like everything is bad. It isn't. A lot of things are really good. I could name them off in my day alone. Wednesday mornings, I go for a hike in the woods with my dog and my very close friend, Dr. Zatz, and his dog, and we have great talks, and I learn a lot, and it's always wonderful, rain or shine. It filled me with joy to start my Wednesday. See? How about that? Now your turn. I'm just saying, these are the bad news headlines. They're the exceptions to the rest of the joy and the love, I hope. All right. Well, what else do I have for you here? School threats proliferated after the shooting in Georgia. In the 3 weeks since 2 children and 2 teachers were shot dead at a Georgia high school, more than 700 students have been arrested and accused of making violent threats against schools. Threats which have terrified parents and students and caused dozens of school closures have happened in at least 45 states, according to a New York Times review. Almost 10% of those arrested were 12 or younger. Dumb kids making dumb mistakes. Talk to your kids about this and the consequences of it. I mean, I made a lot of prank phone calls when I was young, but I wasn't doing that. That's for damn sure. All right, the hurricane's looking pretty bad, strengthening as it moves past Mexico toward the U.S. Gulf Coast. Become a Category 1 hurricane yesterday. It's expected to hit Florida's Big Bend today. Helene is expected to become a Category 3 storm. Around 32 million people are under flood watches. Now let's go to Washington, Capitol Hill, where the House passed a short-term spending bill to avert a government shutdown just ahead of the November election. 2 members of Congress have asked an inspector general to investigate the top federal regulator for medical devices, whose wife is a leading lawyer for device companies, news out of the FDA. The Secret Service is investigating allegations that one of its agents sexually assaulted a female staff member of the presidential campaign of Vice President Kamala Harris, the agency confirmed Wednesday. Wow. And congressional Democrats yesterday have spent a lot of time pressing Republicans on a slew of policies outlined by Project 2025, a 922-page proposal for a future Republican presidency written in part by allies of the disgraced former president. Well, Democrats held this mock hearing on Tuesday on some of the key planks in the agenda. I'll bring you Congressman Sean Casten on that. Also, Democrats used the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing Tuesday to rail against Supreme Court decision that gave criminal immunity to presidents for official acts, which wiped out part of the allegations in the Washington case against Donald Trump related to his efforts to overturn a 2020 presidential election. And finally, here's a piece of good news. I like to end on good news. The Affordable Care Act continues to generate lots of good headlines and news in people's life, actually impacting your life, my life for sure. The Treasury Department's report shows that 4.2 million small business owners and self-employed workers like me have coverage through the ACA marketplaces, up from 3.3 million in 2022 and 1.4 million in 2014. How about that? Those are your headlines. Let's get to the clips that I've gathered for you today. You know, I can't think of a better surrogate for Kamala Harris than Mark Cuban. She's a successful black woman. He's a successful white businessman, billionaire. And those are the types of people that can help convince folks, certainly that need convincing. And Mark Cuban is real good at it. He is out there on the campaign trail working with affiliated. I don't know what the official status of the relationship is, but clearly he is an official surrogate for Kamala Harris for the Harris-Walz campaign. He was with her yesterday in Michigan. And I've got 4 clips of him on 3 different networks and 1 podcast. I think they're really good, so I decided to share them with you. First, here he is on CNN painting Donald Trump as a socialist. And of course, remember, these guys know each other really well because of their connection over The Apprentice.
On a recent Harris campaign call, you compared policy proposals made by Trump to those from independent Senator Bernie Sanders, who's a socialist. What do you mean?
Oh, it was a race for socialism, right? Bernie said that credit card companies should cap their rates, their interest rates at 15%. Donald Trump, being the socialist that he is, had to beat Bernie. So Donald Trump went out and recommended that interest rate caps be set to 10%. The fact that he's even suggesting price controls and price caps is socialism 101. You haven't heard that from the vice president. You have heard that from Donald Trump.
Well, then how do you interpret? How do you interpret what she's doing in terms of price gouging, taking on price gouging by food companies? Because a lot of critics have said that is a form of price controls.
I'm glad you asked me that, Jake, because taking on price gouging is not price controls. She's not saying what the price of tomatoes should be. What she's saying is when there's a crisis, and there will be other crises, there'll be hurricanes, there'll be tornadoes, there'll be floods, there'll be other disasters. And when those disasters happen, she wants to be in a position to be able to say, no, you can't jack up those prices by 40%. You have to stay within a particular realm, a particular guideline. And by the way, there are already 37 states that have similar guidelines. All she's doing is saying we're just going to make that a national law. So that's certainly not price caps or price controls at all. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is the king of price caps.
All right. Well, that was pretty good over on CNN. So then he went to MSNBC to make kind of a different point that she's a very successful businesswoman herself. Listen to this.
I think what a lot of business people don't get, I look at the Harris campaign as a company and Kamala as the CEO, right? She's had, 45 days, 60 days to build an entire organization. And you look at the results. She went from negative favorability ratings. She went from recognition being relatively low. She went from being way behind in every single poll you looked at. And now look where she's at. Worst case, she's tied. In many cases, she's ahead. When you're able to turn around a battleship like a presidential campaign and go from being way behind to tied or ahead, you're doing a lot right. And on the flip side, if you had what seemed like an insurmountable lead and now you've given up that entire lead to another CEO, you're getting fired. Right? So I think that's the beautiful part of looking at what she's doing. She's run her campaign like a CEO. She's had success. And when I go to talk to business people, that's what I tell them. She's actually running her organization like a CEO. And that's the evidence that you need to know that she'll be a great leader, that she understands business, that she understands organizations, and she'll be a friend and partner to business across the board.
Mark.
There you go. Mark Cuban on MSNBC. Well, guess what? He wasn't done there. Then he went on over to Fox Business and served up some hot truth to Neil Cavuto.
Mark, you argue that, and it's always good to have you, you argue that Donald Trump's are particularly, I think you used the word insane. What did you mean by that?
Yep. Well, first of all, strategic tariffs aren't bad. So if a country's trying to dump in the United States and we have a manufacturer there, tariff him, that's great. But across the board tariffs, 10 or 20% is just inflationary. It's a tax on the American consumer. But to make matters even worse, and what's truly insane, when you threaten a legendary company like John Deere with a 200% tariff if they move, but only a 10 or 20% tariff on China, what you're doing is you're making it easy for the Chinese competitors to take business away from John Deere. That is the definition of insane.
A lot of your business colleagues say the definition of insane is supporting Kamala Harris. Yet you do. You're a smart, savvy businessman. You came from nothing to be a multi-billionaire. So you're pretty good at what you do. What do you see in her that you don't see in Donald Trump?
I think she's thorough. If you look at Donald, right, when he talks about his policies, they're very impetuous. They're impulsive. They're, set to match whatever's happening at a rally. Whereas with the Harris campaign and Kamala herself, she's very, very thorough. She's very precise. Her team really vets every idea. And to me, that's important as a business person because you can trust what she says. Think about what happens when Donald comes out and says, I'm going to put a 10% cap on credit card interest rates. The next thing that happens isn't that he explains why. It's that everybody around him explains what he says. He can't explain it for himself. Everybody's got to explain for him. Or whether it's a 10 or 20 or 60% tariff or the 200% on John Deere. With Kamala Harris, no one has to explain for her. She takes the time to vet her policies thoroughly. And when she says them and presents them, they are what they are. They're self-explanatory.
But she doesn't.
All right, there you go. There he's on the 3 major networks. And then he went to one of the most popular podcasts, a comedian named Theo Von. And I thought this was a really interesting and enlightening conversation. Mark Cuban tells Theo Von that he basically grew out of liking Trump and supporting him. And this is the final clip, the fourth and final Mark Cuban clip. I thought it was really interesting.
What do you think made you grow? Like, that's an interesting term, like grew out of it.
You know, once I came out saying I was for him, right?
Oh, you had come out and said that?
Yeah, I said it was the best thing that happened to politics because he wasn't a typical candidate. Now, I didn't think he had a chance.
That's how I felt.
Yeah, because
I would have elected a fucking donut in there if it wasn't a politician.
Exactly right. That's like one of my buddies in Texas. I'm like, why are you voting for Trump? He goes, Mark, I've been voting for politicians my entire life. You know what they've done for me? Nothing. You know the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, right? So I'm like, okay, Dan, I get that, right?
Yeah.
But as I would talk to him, and it's funny because in one of my memory things that came up right just this morning, I was looking at it and it was like he sent me a text. I'd done a CNN interview.
Who, Donald?
Yeah, Donald sent. Well, what he would do is he would write it and then somebody would scan it and then they'd email it to me. And so he sent me what happened because he saw a CNN interview where I criticized him, and I told him, I'm like, you got to start learning the issues, right? You can't just talk. You know, at some point, all these things are important. And if you're going to be president and you've got a chance to win, then you've got to learn this stuff. And I just never felt he made an effort to learn anything, not just that, but anything. Right. And so whenever you try to get into a conversation about details, it never worked.
All right. There you go. Mark Cuban, Mark Cuban Palooza here on Stand Up Today. I saw all those and I thought, I can't pick which ones. I'm going to play them all because that guy's a really effective surrogate. So use those arguments or share them with your friends who really like billionaires. They'll love Mark Cuban then, I guess, huh? Well, I mentioned yesterday the mock trial Democrats put on in the House on Project 2025. I grabbed one clip from that. This is Congressman Sean Casten. I thought this was good.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, since we will not be together on Halloween, I thought I'd share some spooky stories with you. And these spooky stories are all real, verbatim, and lifted directly from the Republican Party's playbook, Project 2025. The Department of Education should be eliminated. Eliminate the Head Start program. The Department of Labor should amend its hazard order regulations to permit teenage workers access to work. In other words, back to the mine, Timmy. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration should be broken up and downsized. No more weather forecasts. And finally, no public education employee shall use a name to address a student other than the name listed on a student's birth certificate. This will, of course, be a problem for James Donald Bowman, James David Hamill, J.D. Hamill, or as they now identify, J.D. Vance. This is truly scary because it is a real plan. But, Madam Speaker, I hope you and all Americans' fears are only imaginary. In 2025. I yield back.
One of the controversial stories going around yesterday was this absolutely vile congressman from Louisiana, Clay Higgins, who's an outright racist, conspiracy theorist, MAGA, corrupt guy, real not good, real bad guy. Well, he tweeted a horribly racist thing. I'll read it to you. It said, LOL, these Haitians are wild, eating pets, voodoo, nastiest country in the Western Hemisphere, cults, slapstick gangsters, but damned if they don't feel all sophisticated now. Filing charges against our president and VP. All these thugs better get their mind right and their ass out of our country before January 20th. He deleted his post after he was confronted by actual other Republicans, including Byron Donalds, and was threatened with a censure resolution by the Congressional Black Caucus led by Stephen Horsford, a Democrat of Nevada. However, in a statement to CNN, the congressman defended his remarks. He said, it's all true. I could put up another controversial post tomorrow if you want me to. I mean, we do have freedom of speech. I'll say what I want, he said in a statement read out loud by Anderson Cooper. It's not a big deal to me. It's like something stuck to the bottom of my boot. Just scrape it off and move on with my life. Well, here is first Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, being asked about it yesterday. He did not like having to answer this question. But when you're the leader of the crazies and you're crazy yourself, well, get used to it.
Any any comment on the tweet that Clay Higgins put out today about Haitians?
I heard about that on the floor just now as well. Clay Higgins is a dear friend of mine and a colleague from Louisiana, and a very frank and outspoken person. But he's also a very principled man. And I think he tweeted. I didn't even see it, but he tweeted something today about Haitians, and he was approached
by January 28th.
Okay. Well, look, he was approached on the floor by colleagues who said that was offensive. He went to the back. I just talked to him about it. He said he went to the back and he prayed about it and he regretted it and he pulled the post down. That's what you want a gentleman to do. I'm sure he probably regrets some of the language he used, but we move forward. We believe in redemption around here.
We believe in redemption around here. Do we? Is that right? Okay, well, we'll remember that next time somebody else does something absolutely horribly racist and vile. We believe in redemption. He prayed on it. Well, here is Congressman Steve Horsford on the House floor yesterday calling for the censure of Clay Higgins.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice of my intent to offer a question of the privileges of the House. The form is as follows. H-Res 1500. Censuring Representative Glenn Clay Higgins of the 3rd Congressional District of Louisiana. Whereas on September 25th, 2025, Representative Higgins used his official account on X to publicly slander, insult, and demean all Haitians and Haitian Americans in an overtly racist post.
Well, we'll see what happens with that. I don't want to belabor it too much. A lot of people talking about it yesterday. This is more important. This is Congressman Robert Garcia, who does a really good job. And he and other Democrats in Congress, including Jamie Raskin, have been on the case of Jared Kushner's influence peddling and how much of a threat he is to national security for a real long time. And it has gotten a lot more attention and getting more investigation now in the Senate. But here's Congressman Garcia talking about this yesterday on the House floor.
In the past 18 months, Republicans have gathered 3.8 million documents and 80 hours of witness testimonies on a baseless inquiry against President Joe Biden. But now that Joe Biden is not running for president, they've ended their political impeachment stunt. Now, the investigation that we should be focusing on is Jared Kushner and his $2 billion from the Saudis just months after leaving the Trump White House. Now, new reporting today from the New York Times has noted that Jared Kushner collected $112 million in fees, but hasn't made a single dime for the Saudis through this fund. Now, we don't know if the Saudis expected profits or if they just wanted to reward Jared for his service. This $2 billion payment for this investment fund represents the reward of sitting next to former President Trump and pushing for pro-Saudi policies. During his time in the White House, Mr. Kushner consistently ignored the recommendations of top foreign policy experts at the State Department and even ignored the warnings of Trump's own Secretary of State. These conflicts of interest and the national security threats are obvious, but House Republicans are not interested in uncovering the truth about Kushner's actions or the suspicious actions of the Saudi government and other foreign governments. While the Senate is beginning to finally move on this investigation, the House has done nothing. Mr. Speaker, we can no longer wait to hold the Kushners accountable for their shady dealings. Our democracy is not for sale, and we need to ask ourselves the question, why did Jared Kushner receive $2 billion for an investment fund just months after leaving the White House? The American people deserve answers, and we should never stop until we get them.
All right. Good stuff. I hope they don't. That's a really very important issue. Imagine if that were Hunter Biden. Okay, well, Nancy Mace stooped to a new low yesterday. Here's 16 seconds talking on Fox News to Harris Faulkner, where she calls immigrants now pedophiles. They were just rapists and bringing drugs, but now they're pedophiles too, because that's the worst thing you can call a person. And Nancy Mace is one of the worst people, so here you go.
Just last week, Harris, 158 Democrats voted against my bill, the Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act, that would deport these criminal illegal aliens who are raping our women, who are pedophiles, and who are murdering our women and girls, just as you cited in Nantucket and other places. Every town has become a border town. Every state has become a border state.
Okay. All right. Wow. Calm down. Let's go back to MSNBC. Nicole Wallace was talking to her friend Michael Cohen, who said if Trump wins, he's going to leave his family.
What do you think happens to you if he wins?
Well, I'm out of here. I mean, I'm already working on a foreign passport with a completely different name. I don't know how it's going to work as far as dealing with my wife and my children. I certainly don't want them moving to where I'm looking to go. But I don't think yourself, the president of MSNBC, General Milley, Liz Cheney, how many people has he turned around and said that these are people that I intend to go after if I have the ability to? And the worst is the Supreme Court's recent decision that gave him immunity, presidential immunity. Now he thinks it's not only is it I can do whatever I want, but I can't even be prosecuted. It's a get out of jail free card solely for the president.
So you're out of here. You'd leave the country.
I have no choice.
Unbelievable state of being. Michael Cohen.
I'll still be available to you, but by remote.
Right, encrypted remote. Thank you for spending time with us today.
It's always good to see you.
Well, you've been right about everything.
Been right about everything? Well, I don't know what she's talking about, but I thought that was funny and weird. And so I shared it with you. Here's Kamala Harris yesterday in Michigan. This is in Pittsburgh.
I intend to chart a new way forward and grow America's middle class. Donald Trump intends to take America backward. You see, for Donald Trump, our economy works best if it works for those who own the big skyscrapers, not those who actually build them, not those who wire them, not those who mop the floors.
All right. Well, I wanted to get some clips from her MSNBC interview, but I did not get a chance to get to it. But I highly recommend you watch it. And finally, I've got for you a funny clip from Jimmy Kimmel Live where, again, Trump in a speech over the weekend went after Jimmy Kimmel as a bad Oscars host. This is all the way back in March, and he's still talking about it. So Kimmel brought that back up. He read the stuff that the Truth Socials he read and said, even took a shot at Jimmy Kimmel's wife. So Jimmy Kimmel asked his wife, who's also a writer on the show, Molly, to come up, and I thought she used that stage fairly effectively, and it was pretty funny at the end. Here it is.
Since you think my wife gives good advice, maybe here she is with some advice. Molly, please.
Hey. Support. And I'm glad I have your attention because 1 in 3 women currently in this country is living under an abortion ban because you stacked our Supreme Court. Thanks to you, women in 21 states can't make their own choice about their own life and their own body. And 10 U.S. states make no exceptions for rape or incest. The party you run so bigly and so beautifully, the party that cares so much about motherhood, just blocked a bill that would protect our access to IVF. Women are dying and good doctors are quitting because they can't get or give the reproductive care women desperately need. So my advice for you is to shut up and go away. Go to Mar-a-Lago. Spend all day, every day, cheating at golf and masturbating to Newsmax and let a competent woman take over. That's my advice. Thanks for listening.
He says the same to me. Thank you, Molly. What's with the trophy?
This is the Emmy that I won for executive producing the Oscars that were hosted by the worst host in history.
Well done.
All right, there you go. I thought that was great. And now it's time to get to my guests. I've got Wajahat Ali coming up. But first, a 4-minute conversation that I had with the former congresswoman from Florida, who is now the Democratic nominee for Senate, that we really want to beat Rick Scott, Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. Mucarsel-Powell gave the speech just before mine. How about that? She opened for me. No, it was just, they wanted to close on a bang. How about that? And my performance was, last. But I was very happy to watch her speech addressing all of the 600 or so educators and union members in that audience on Friday night. And so here is my conversation with her just after that on the sidelines right outside the venue. Go to DebbieForFlorida.com to support her. Here we are.
I want to ask you three, I think, easy questions. Okay. Number one, a lot of the country is paying attention to your campaign. It seems like suddenly you've got a chance to beat Rick Scott. How are you going to beat Rick Scott, specifically when he's the richest guy with all of the money?
Yeah. We've been building a very strong grassroots campaign, and you could see, that solid win that we had on August 20th on the primary. That was because of the people in the campaign that we've been building. We have been communicating and reaching out to voters for a year now. So even though he has all the money in the world, I have the people, and it's the people ultimately that vote. And everywhere I go, and I've been reaching out I've been in blue counties and red counties because ultimately we should put partisan politics aside and be a united Florida to take back our state, because we have been facing too many extreme attacks and people are tired of the extremism and they're really coming together. I just met two Republicans today, actually, at one of the events that we had at Seminole County, and they came to my event and they said, look, we wanted to meet you. We're really excited. We can't stand Rick Scott. He's done nothing for us, and we're going to be supporting you in this race.
How important are these ballot initiatives, women's reproductive rights, cannabis, to your campaign?
Well, it's mobilizing our base, young voters, women, people that, for them, their top issue is making sure that they have that freedom to be able to make their own choices. And a lot of men say to me that this is a top issue because it's a family issue also, by the way. So for women, it's central to our healthcare, to our dignity, to our safety. We see that when they pass extreme bans, there's a higher rate of violence and also higher rates of maternal mortality. We're hearing all those stories. Yeah. For men, they take the fact that they have to protect, their sisters, their daughters' rights, making sure that they're not facing a dire situation where they can have access to that health care. And so I think it's mobilizing people from all political sides, bringing people together in our state to come out and vote.
Well, are you hearing anything? Are you learning anything? You're a former congresswoman, but are you learning anything from voters about what they care about?
Their top two issues is the affordability crisis that we have in Florida. People can't afford housing and the insurance rates, and also health care, which in that umbrella, it's women's rights to choose, reproductive freedom, but also Social Security and Medicare.
Things have gotten so ugly, and specifically, I just want to get your reaction. There's a lot of Haitian Americans in Florida. What do you say about what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and others have done to the Haitian community of Ohio? And how does that make you feel, and what do you say to them?
I'm extremely concerned with the rhetoric that is so hateful, that is really dehumanizing immigrants and Haitian Americans. They call Florida home. Almost 500,000 of Haitian Americans live here in the state of Florida. And I'm concerned because it can incite violence and hatred towards a group of people that have been living here for decades legally, by the way, and they have been taking care of our elderly. They're nurses, they are teachers, they are part of our community, and we need to stand up for them. And for me, once you start attacking a group, it never stops there. And we've seen a rise in anti-Semitism. We've seen a rise in this hateful rhetoric against immigrants. I'm an immigrant. I am where I am today because of the opportunities and the freedom that I've had in this country. Now they want to take all of that away. Right. And like the vice president says, we're not going back. It's not happening.
So when you speak to a national audience, listening to this, watching this, wherever they're seeing it, I imagine the best thing people can do to support your campaign is send money, because he's got so much money in this Florida media market. Is there anything else?
We can win this race. I need everyone to support me, DebbieForFlorida.com. And you can help and volunteer virtually. We're doing text banks. We're doing phone banks. This is going to be a turnout race. And here's what I want people to understand. Amendment 4, protecting a woman's right to choose, requires a 60% vote. Yeah. All the polling is showing that we're going to be able to get there. I only need 50+1. People are coming out to vote in this election cycle. They're voting for reproductive freedom, and they're voting for the woman candidate running for Senate that's going to protect that freedom.
Thank you for coming and talking to teachers and me. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Good luck to you.
All right. That's it. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, Debbie for Florida. Go support her. Really nice. And I was happy that I got the chance to talk to her, and hopefully I'll talk to her again and again in the future after she wins in Florida. Tell your Florida friends to get out and vote for her. Very powerful, very smart. Lost her father to gun violence when she was 24 years old. She told that story. It's absolutely horrific. But now it's time to get to our headliner for today's show. He needs no introduction. He's one of your favorites, certainly my mom's. Wajahat Ali, wajali.com. His book, Go Back to Where You Came From, and other helpful recommendations on how to become American is so good. You got to subscribe to The Left Hook. I know many of you have subscribed to his new Substack, but if you haven't, definitely get on board and subscribe. Get a free subscription. If you like it, pay for it, but definitely go get that free subscription right now. thelefthook.substack.com. Subscribe now. I'd love to get him 10, 20, 30 subscribers today. thelefthook.substack.com. It's real good. He's taping interviews. He's writing pieces. And I highly recommend that you subscribe. Of course, follow him on Twitter. Listen to Democracy-ish with Danielle Moody. It's a great podcast, real fun. Go join their community as well. They're always great. And now let's do it with Wajahat Ali. Yes, it's Warbalat. It's my favorite. That's my favorite one. Warbalat.
Warbalat has returned, also known as Sir Wajahat, also known as Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, also known as Kamala Harris, also known as Wajahat, the Spanish friend that has just come from Mexico. Who cares? Spanish, Mexican, it's all the same. It is me.
Also known as thelefthook.substack.com, which I love. Big fan. I never miss an article. I love it. I've been wanting to talk to you about so many of these, and we won't have time to cover it all. But tell people about what you're doing over there. You're publishing every day at that Substack?
Yeah, man, it was supposed to just be like 2 or 3 times a week, a little jab here and there, but I found the news to be overwhelming, and I feel like there needs to be a correction, and I feel like corporate media, as you know, has oftentimes failed to really warn Americans about the threats to our democracy and our freedoms, and I have the space and the freedom to call it like it is without any bullshit, and I try my best to always be honest and truthful, and once in a while, you know, I'm able to have some good conversation with folks, and I'm able to also break news write about breaking news without having to go through an intermediary and wait for them to come back to me and say yes or no. And so, you know, as of last night, I'm sure you saw the murder. I'm going to call it the murder.
Yeah, I wanted to start with talking with you about Marcellus Williams, or what's his Muslim name, was what, Khalifa?
Yeah. I mean, I called it a modern day lynching. I put the article on Left Hook. I'm glad people appreciated it. And I call it a modern day lynching in Missouri, where the Supreme Court, the 6 justices of the Supreme Court, the conservative pro-life justices, could have and should have stayed the execution because the prosecutors, notice I didn't say defense, the prosecutors themselves said that there's new evidence that shows that this man could be innocent. The prosecutors themselves did a motion to vacate the capital punishment, right? You had Innocence Project begging them not to kill this man because they said the evidence that they had was tainted. And again, there's new evidence. You had the family members of the woman who was killed saying, don't kill him. You had 3 original jurors saying, don't kill him. And so what does the Missouri governor and attorney general and Republicans in the state do? Backed by the 6 pro-life conservative justices. They killed him. They killed him because they could, Pete. They killed him because it was a black man. They killed him because they wanted another black scalp to show to their base, see, we're the ones in charge. It's us. We're going to take care of the invaders, whether it's black people, Haitians, Jews, Muslims. This is our town. And if you think I'm being a little bit too hyperbolic, I want to remind everyone that the same Missouri governor who refused to give us just an extension, just give an extension, right? Just delay it with new evidence. The prosecutors, for the love of God, are telling you, don't kill this man. This is the same governor who pardoned the McClatchys. We've talked about the McClatchys on your show. That was that broke-ass, rich Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, the St. Louis couple. No?
St. Louis suburban couple that brandished their guns illegally at peaceful BLM protesters. They pled guilty. And the governor came and pardoned them. And those McClatchys got a primetime slot.
The RNC. They spoke. They were invited to speak at the RNC. Yes.
Warn about the invasion. That's what we're dealing with, man.
Yeah.
And it just the more I think about it, the more It's just disgusting.
It is a horrible, horrible thing. I think lynching is the appropriate word. And, of course, the death penalty, I mean, I've been talking about it for years, debating it with folks. It's not a deterrent. Conservatives don't like it in a lot of places, religious conservatives. There's a whole organization called Conservatives Against Capital Punishment, I think it's called. And, of course, it fails sometimes. And the idea that you could put 1% of innocent people to death is worth not having it. That, and no other civilized country in the world uses it. And the rest of the world, when you travel, they always talk about our horrible death penalty, capital punishment, and it seems to be only getting worse. I've got to move on to something else I want to ask you about. A different black man, but this black man is upholding white supremacy. That's for damn sure. You and Danielle had a great episode of Democracy-ish where you went through a whole bunch of sex scandals, but this one is probably the most important and impactful. Mark Robinson, the gubernatorial candidate for Republicans in North Carolina, he could single-handedly take down the ticket, the state, the governor, and help Kamala Harris win because of this, which is why I think I heard you say, and I didn't see this reporting, but that they think it's Republicans who leaked it to get him off the ticket before anybody finds out. But what are your thoughts on the significance of what we found out about this guy? And I mean, if he stayed on the ballot, he'd still get thousands of votes. Isn't that a weird thing? Like hundreds of thousands, millions?
He's like Clayton Bigsby come to life.
Yes.
For those who don't know what Clayton Bigsby is, it's probably one of the best Chappelle show sketches, top 5 sketches, where Dave Chappelle's character is a blind black man who grew up in the South. Nobody told him he was black, and he ends up being the leader of the local KKK, saying the most horrific things, and the local KKK just keeps him covered up because they're like, man, he's so effective, but he's black. And so he ends up hating himself. Even when he finds out that he's black, he divorces his white wife because he says, I can't stand being married to an end lover. That's Mark Robinson, a man who, by the way, I think this is important. Before all these revelations came out, and CNN did a great investigation, it was already known, Pete, that this man frequented porn sites in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was already known that he wrote on social media that he prefers Adolf Hitler to the Obama administration. It was already known that he used anti-Semitic tropes and Islamophobic tropes. It was already known. We saw the video where he preached violence, literally violence from the pulpit against liberals. And after all of this, and oh, by the way, after it was revealed that he was a hypocrite who is against abortion, even for, in any circumstance, right? He's against abortion. He paid for his mistress's abortion.
No!
After all of this, Donald Trump said that this man is like Martin Luther King. He's better than Martin Luther King. He's Martin Luther King like steroids. Yeah. He said that this man is aging like fine wine. So all of this was perfectly fine with Republicans. That's what I want people to know. And then the report came out that said he referred to himself as a black Nazi. And he said that he wants slavery to be reinstated so he could own slaves. I would take it a step further, Pete, and say that if that was the only thing that would be revealed, his base wouldn't care. The thing that I believe sunk him is the following. This is a man who said that homosexuality and transgenderism, his words, are a moral aberration, filth. It was revealed by his own quote on this porn site, which is Nude Africa, that he's really, really, really into trans porn. He loves himself from some trans porn. And I think, Pete, that's what did it.
Yeah, because black Nazi you can do. Fair porn you can do. But, dude, you're into tranny porn? You are off the ticket, bro.
Once you're into
by the way, the only thing that was actually completely okay to be into, if that's your kink, if that's what you like watching, and that's what is knocking him off the ballot. It's the other stuff, black Nazi, that keeps him on. But the fact that he's attracted to trans people.
Black Nazi, violence, hypocrisy, porn, lying, cheating on his wife, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. That's slavery. But trans porn? Seeing dudes, women with penises, that's what he was into? No, that's a bridge too far. And I also want to remind people, just to show the hypocrisy of the GOP, and that's why it's so important, is that Madison Cawthorn. Remember Madison Cawthorn?
Oh, yeah. I always joked about how handsome I think he is.
Yeah, the handsome Madison Cawthorn, who was the upstart Matt Gaetz, the young man in the wheelchair, who was perfectly fine with the January 6th insurrection, supported the violent insurrection, supported the election lies, supported racism, filmed himself beating up a tree. All of that was fine. Do you know what got him sunk by Republicans? Remember that?
Cocaine sex party?
The first rule of Smash Club is you never talk about Smash Club. And Madison.
Oh, we talked about it.
Remember, he said he was invited to like sex parties, and he saw like the elder statesmen doing drugs, these cocaine sex parties. And a week later, bye-bye, Madison Cawthorn.
The Republican Party dropped him, basically. They wouldn't support his reelection. The Republican
Party dropped him, and they tried to drop Mark Robinson, but Mark Robinson stayed in the race. He's still in the race. He's doubling down. And so it's almost like, hey, Republicans, did you learn from the mistake of Herschel Walker? And Republicans are like, hold my beer. We give you Mark Robinson.
Well, Herschel Walker was just stupid. Mark Robinson is like really well-spoken and charismatic in a weird kind of way. He's a preacher, and that's why Trump, he gravitated towards him. He's also a white supremacist and sexist and a real creep and a black Nazi. But I mean, I feel like that comparison just doesn't do it justice, because Herschel Walker's not a great guy, but this guy is a monster. I don't know. They're both, conservative.
Well, apparently, according to Herschel Walker's kids, he was terrible and a hypocrite.
Yeah.
He is like Herschel Walker's on steroids.
All right, let's move on to another nightmare situation. You wrote about it at the Left Hook, and you talked with, I love that you're talking to people and embedding those conversations like a podcast right into the post. It's great. It's working real good for me. TheLeftHook.substack.com. You talked to Kevin Cruz, who's a very respected, well-known historian, about Trump's horrific lie about Haitian immigrants. What did you learn about America's history and the fact that this playbook is not new, but real overt this time?
Yeah, Kevin, great historian, works at Princeton, also progressive in his politics, has done the work and said, like you mentioned, that this is a reboot. And these myths about the invaders have been used against the Irish Catholic, against Jews, against Latinos, against Mexicans. Ever since the Southern strategy of the 60s, they were oftentimes used in a dog whistle. But there's no longer a dog whistle. This is them doing it through the bullhorn, literally painting a target on these communities. Not just Haitians, but the communities themselves are under threat. And it's an aspect of stochastic terrorism, which I've mentioned on your show, right? We might as well just call it terrorism. And what the Wall Street Journal came out with last week, that bastion of lefty wokeness, the Wall Street Journal, in its reporting, they revealed that Trump and his aides were informed before his disastrous debate with Kamala Harris that it was all a debunked lie. It was a nonsense conspiracy theory. Even after knowing that, what did Trump say at the debate as he was being pummeled? He went back to the only trick he had, racism. He unleashed it. Yeah. J.D. Vance last week called them illegal. A couple of days ago, just 2 days ago, Donald Trump chanted, send them back, send them back. The crowd chanted, send them back. These are legal migrants, Haitian migrants, who came here in 1990, got temporary protected status from the old George W. Bush's dad, who have helped revitalize that community. And now that entire community is under threat. Schools have closed down. City Hall had to close down. You had law enforcement telling people this is debunked. The lady who promoted the conspiracy has now apologized. She said, I couldn't find my cat. I found the cat in the basement. I made this stupid lie up. I freaked out. I'm so sorry. And they're tripling down on it. And someone's going to get killed, Pete. Someone's going to get killed.
I just hope that it animates the Haitian American voters in Florida.
500,000, right? Apparently Florida's in play, man. I mean, some people say she's down 4 points, but another thing had her down only 1 point.
Yeah, actually, I just interviewed her in person. I was down there and talked to her. She's real good.
But what'd she say? Is it in play?
Yeah, I mean, even off the record, I'll basically tell you what she said off the record, on the record, which was basically, I don't think any surprise. Like, we need money because Rick Scott has unlimited money. He's a super wealthy guy, his campaign, and there's like 10 media markets in Florida, so you can advertise a lot and have an effect, and so that costs a lot of money. So yeah, donate to her, and it's close. It's definitely close, and abortion's on the ballot. It's a big deal down there. So
my thing is this: even if you look at strategically, even if you don't win Florida, if you could get close and chip away, and if you can have Republicans spending their money in Florida, which they never thought they would, they won't have the time and energy to spend in North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania.
So, just a quick question, just a thought. When you hear people say that they're on the fence between Kamala and Donald Trump, doesn't that mean that they're voting for Trump?
Yes.
Is that what you hear? Is there any data? I don't know if there's any data about that.
No. It's the same as 2016. Until now, when you hear people just say that means they're voting for Trump.
Right.
If you see like people say the uncommitted, right, I'd vote for Kamala if, then you realize, okay, most likely they'll probably hold their nose and vote for Kamala. But if people, as of now, 5 weeks out of the election, it's like, I'm on the fence, they're voting for Trump. It reminds me of 2016. I was in Maine at a Trump rally, and Maine is very white. And I asked all these people who you're going to vote for, and it was like a couple of weeks before the election, like, whoa, easy, we don't talk about who we vote for in Maine. That's not what we do. I'm like, you're voting for Trump.
Right.
And I remember I came back home and I saw that rally. They were like, it was the entire diversity of whiteness, wealthy whites, poor whites, redheaded whites, blonde whites, cardigan whites. And I told my wife for the first time, I'm like, this guy might win. I still thought Clinton would edge it out, but I'm like, it's going to be closer than people think. However, this time around, I believe Kamala will win. I believe she's going to win the popular vote. And even in these battleground states, I think it's going to be the flip, Pete, where a lot of folks are going to come out. I think a lot of young people, a lot of folks who are new voters, a lot of women. I think they're going to come out and give her the edge. And I think she's going to win handily, inshallah. That's my prediction.
Well, inshallah.
The fact that it's so close. The fact that it's so close, it's listen, I hate saying this. It's the whites, Pete. You got to talk to the whites. You saw that poll that came out yesterday. It's the only reason this is a quote unquote close race is because of the whites. That's it.
That makes me feel bad when you say that. It hurts my feelings.
Well, I just know that I blame you for all the white Trump voters.
What percentage?
Pretty much all, because you are the whitest man I know. You're the avatar of the whites, and as the leader of the whites. You should have done more to moderate the white women.
I think
50% of white women for Trump. So it seems like he's going to get for the third time a majority of white women.
Yeah.
So I blame you.
The whitest thing I think I participate in regularly throughout my life is skiing. I think I could probably have a bigger impact at the mountain. Maybe I should just be riding the lift and talking to people a lot more.
In all seriousness, if you actually did that, you would probably convince some donors.
Let me also ask you about this new front of the war in the Middle East. I want to ask you before, I don't know which comes first, how it affects domestic politics, because when you talk about the demographics that you think are going to help Kamala win, the one I continue to be concerned about are brown folks, Muslim folks, Arab folks, those that are concerned about this administration and the way forward, their support for Israel. Specifically, I'm thinking about Michigan. That's an important state where there are a lot of those folks. I hear the Polish in Pennsylvania for Kamala, so we got that. But what do you think about those voters, specifically in Michigan or anywhere else, and if they've changed hearts and minds in any way on this issue? What do you hear? You are brown, you're a Muslim, so just as much as I represent the guilty whites, and not that these people are guilty, but I want to know what you're hearing, if anything. And then we could talk about the new front, or you can combine it all.
Sure. So the uncommitted voters, if you look at the official platform, right, it's very practical. And it says, please meet with us. Please end this war to Kamala Harris, impose even a short-term arms embargo. And we want to vote for you. We want to vote for you. Please do this.
The uncommitted voter specifically is the name being given or being used by.
And many of them are Democratic delegates, right? They're like, we are Democrats. We want to vote for you, but this is where our community is. And if we can use some leverage and pressure to end this disastrous war, where there's war crimes happening every single day, and now they're happening in Lebanon. Don't take my word for it. Listen to Leon Panetta, the former CIA director, who said Israel's weaponization of daily objects such as the cell phones is an act of terrorism, opens up a new battleground, and the United Nations Commissioner of Human Rights specifically said it's a war crime. They're breaking international law. It's spreading terror. Furthermore, you now have 27,000 people displaced in Beirut. You have 2,000 people injured, over 500 people killed, over 50 kids killed. And so we sit there and we go, and Israel says, I'm not making this up. This sounds like a line from Dr. Strangelove. Israel says, we will have de-escalation through escalation. It's like saying we will bomb them in order to save them. That's what was said in Vietnam. Has it ever worked in Israel's history? It has not worked. I give you the past 1-year war in Gaza, and the family members of the hostages are now protesting this war in Lebanon as they're protesting Netanyahu, because they realize, oh my God, it's going to endanger the lives of the hostages. There's a peace deal there. President Biden promoted it. He said Israel has this is Israel's deal, right? Ceasefire, release of hostages, humanitarian aid. Netanyahu refuses to do it because Netanyahu knows that if he ends the war, his government will collapse. He will be forced to resign. He'll most likely go to jail. So he'll go all in domestically. This is how it ties into domestic politics. The reason why Netanyahu is going all in is he realizes he has 5 weeks of carte blanche. Why does he have 5 weeks of carte blanche? He knows neither the Democrats or the Republicans are going to upset the status quo. Right. What I've heard on the DL, and makes sense, is Democrats do not want to touch this issue. They just want to get to the finish line. They want to win. If they touch this issue, they believe it could hurt them with, funders or donors or with the media. And you saw Donald Trump in a ridiculous attack try at the debate. She hates Israel. She hates Israel. She hates Israel, right? So Democrats don't even want to touch that. Netanyahu knows that. He knows he has U.S. by the balls. He's crossed every single one of Biden's lines. And now he's committing war crimes in Lebanon with U.S. help, weapons, and aid. My take on this has always been this. In order to help people, help the hostages, help the Palestinians, and help Democrats, it is in the Democrats' political interest to actually use pressure to do a ceasefire because a majority of Democratic voters and now a majority of Americans want a ceasefire. Yep. So yes, you will piss off a small minority of folks, Pete, but the calculus is I believe they will win over more people, especially these uncommitted voters who are not just Arabs and Palestinians and Muslims, by the way, in these swing states and add to their pad and margin. And one of the big mistakes, last thing I'll say, a huge mistake, just an egregious oversight that has pissed off so many voters, Pete. And like you're the white trying your best. I'm a Muslim trying my best. This conversation exploded on Muslim WhatsApp today. Just have a Palestinian speaker at the DNC, side by side with the Israeli speaker. And they refused. And that was just an unnecessary opening of a wound, Pete, that humiliated these communities. And now there's fights in Muslim and South Asian WhatsApps. A group came out just today and endorsed Kamala Harris, a Muslim group. And man, oh man, they're getting shit on, Pete. And a bunch of us are trying our best, but those were voters right there, Pete.
And what are they saying? Are they focused on the DNC issue that you just said, or this new what kind of?
All of it. They had a moment at DNC, shit on us. They have a moment right now, shit on us. They refused to curb Netanyahu. Now it's in Lebanon. The attack on students, the attack on protesters, the attack on Rashida Tlaib. I don't know if you saw that. The ugly Senator Kennedy attack. The fact that Schumer and Democrats were kind of mild. The smearing of Rashida Tlaib yesterday that CNN had to, apologize for. Yeah. All of it adds up. And it reminds me, Pete, of 2008. I remember I was speaking to Howard Dean, who was the head of the Democratic National Committee at that time. There was a fundraiser. And I asked him, what will Democrats say about the increased weaponization of Islamophobia by Republicans and Obama? And his eyes blurred out at me. And he looked at me and said, the election is 2 months away. Translation, shut the F up. Let us win the election. And Muslims did their part. But it's a repeat 16 years later, where it's like, shut up. You don't matter. Your lives don't matter. The other guy is worse. Shut your mouth and vote. And it's not just Muslims and Arabs, folks. It's a lot of Democratic voters, a majority according to the polls, who think that Israel's committing a genocide. So if you believe that Israel's committing a genocide and we're aiding and abetting it, it's very hard to win them over and say, yeah, but still vote for Harris. So I'm trying my best, but that's where people are. You asked me, I give you an honest answer.
I appreciate it. I really do. Obviously, that's very troubling to hear. And I hope there's some change, or I hope is there any argument that, or point that can be made that you think is more effective than another? I mean, it can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good seems to be the general argument. But
realistically, according to the polls, if Biden has nothing to lose, was to flex his power like Reagan did in the past and Eisenhower did in the past, and picked up the phone call and said, we're going to stop shipment of arms overnight. This war will end. And then will be forced to cease. We will be forced to do it. I don't think he will, ideologically. And based upon what I said, the political calculation that it's too risky. There's 5 weeks left. It seems like Harris might win. So let Netanyahu go ham for 5 weeks, and then we'll deal with it.
What do you make of the new front and just the strategy for Israel and why they are doing this? Obviously, they've been being attacked pretty consistently by rockets, but this has always been the case, certainly in southern Lebanon and northern Israel. They've always had these issues, but this is a huge escalation for several reasons. Obviously, the blowing up of the beepers, which most people just think is fascinating and joke about, including me when it first started. And then Rothkopf really humbled me told me how serious it was and how much of an escalation was. Then I saw Panetta say what you just said, that it's terrorism. So they've assassinated leadership, and obviously the strikes are now on Beirut. So like all the conditions, the red lines have been passed by the Israelis to escalate this. And it's I don't know. It just seems like
now U.S. troops are being sent to the Middle East, and Israel is threatening ground war. It's escalation into another front that gives Netanyahu another year of war that keeps him from accountability. It's going to not bring any peace or security because military solutions have always failed. In 1982, Israel invaded southern Lebanon for the summer. 15 to 20,000 people were killed, mostly civilians. They did it to weaken and destroy PLO. PLO was weakened. Guess what sprung up afterwards? Hezbollah. Guess what sprung up afterwards? Hamas. If they destroy Hamas and Hezbollah, which they want, which Israeli intelligence itself knows it hasn't and it won't, the idea won't die because people resist occupation. Throughout time, Pete, whether you're Irish, Indian, Ukrainian, people resist occupation through violent means and nonviolent means. Everyone wants to be free. Every military solution that Israel has tried has failed. I gave you the past year in Gaza. Has it made Israel and the region safer? Nope. Has it released the hostages? Nope. You know what did? The temporary ceasefire last November, ushered in by the United States. It released 105 hostages, and there was temporary humanitarian aid and a ceasefire. Since then, Israel has only, quote unquote, saved about 9 hostages. Probably when it's all said and done, there's an inquiry. We will find out that Israel unintentionally killed more of its own hostages. We know it's killed at least 3. So it's a situation which will exacerbate chaos, because it always has. Israel says de-escalation through escalation. Their words, not mine. Madness. And the one thing they've never tried, Pete, they've never tried this, but this is what I believe will bring about security and peace. End the occupation. Give Palestinians a pathway towards self-determination. Whether it's 1 state, 2 state, something else, let them be free.
Yeah, I don't see it in the near future, but I really appreciate that very dead-on commentary. It's so important. All right, last thing I wanted to just ask you is a lot of people are talking about, and I think it's really important. Trump said something a little bit different, a little bit new, worth examining when he talked about how he would take care of women. And he would solve all of their problems. That's it. I'll get rid of your anxiety. You don't have your jobs. No more wrinkles. No more gray hair. I mean, it was...
Take care of your vaginas.
Yeah, I mean, it was real gross, and a lot of people are reacting. It's predatory. It's weird. But this is his play to women. He's going to take care of them. I am your savior. What is your reaction to this new attempt? And by the way, he says... we brought abortion back to the States. We just sent it back to the States as if there's no women in those states.
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked this question, and I'm glad you're teasing it out. The reason why he said it's very deliberate. It's very intentional. It plays into white Christian nationalism. It plays into patriarchy. And there was a great study that just got released by PRRI, Public Religion Research Institute, which is fantastic polling about the intersection of religion and how it plays in culture and politics. And I invited the CEO of PRI to speak about this.
Yeah, Melissa Deckman. I talked to her here, and then I saw you talk to her. I talked to Robbie Jones, and I just talked to Jim Wallace, who I listened to your interview to prepare for mine, which is really great that you did, I think, for, I don't know, C-SPAN or something. But
C-SPAN.
Yeah.
No, but the two things from that and how it connects to this is the right-wing support. The data shows right-wing support for authoritarianism and white supremacy, the support of violence, in order to effectuate these goals, but also the intersection of those who favor patriarchy and type of strong child rearing. And specifically, what the ideology is that we need strong men to come back. We need women to be traditional wives who give birth to children. We need to have normal gender roles. We need to discipline our kids. Our men and our boys are being emasculated and turned into women by feminists and the Jews and the blacks. And as such, we need the strong men to come back and to protect our homes, to protect our borders, to protect our native identity, and to protect, wait for it, women. Which is why, based on what you just said, based on what Trump said, are you surprised that 50% of white women, a majority of white women, according to the CNN poll, are still for Trump? A majority of white women have gone Republican since the 60s. They will always, hopefully, inshallah, not this year, support white supremacy because they believe being near white supremacy benefits and protects them, their husband, and their son.
Yeah, well said. Well, exactly right. And just read all these experts who are writing about Christian nationalism. It's the thing. I mean, when people talk about, by the way, Trump keeps saying there were no terrorist attacks on his watch. That if you're only thinking about brown Muslim extremists, Then I don't think there were. I'm not sure. But there were a ton of terror attacks on his watch from white supremacists that terrorized every community, Hispanic community, the Jewish community, the black community, more than once.
Law enforcement.
Exactly.
Poll workers, media.
So, the idea that, anyway, I don't know what my train of thought was. I wanted to ask you this.
It's a good point. It's a really good point because they always talk about terrorism, national security. But when it's white supremacist terrorists, but when it's MAGA attacking all of his enemies, but when it's January 6th violent insurrectionists, but when it's the guy in Texas who killed the armed white man at the BLM protester, when it's the McClatchys in Missouri, guess what? They get pardoned. Abbott pardoned the guy, the Missouri governor pardoned the guy, and Donald Trump promised he will pardon the January 6th violent insurrectionists.
Yeah, those guys. Yeah,
what more do you need to see, people? What more do you need to see?
Fun question to end. This is one of my favorite times of year. I'm a Halloween baby. I love autumn. We are 3 days into fall, autumn. Where are you on pumpkins? Where are you on this time of year? What is your childhood connection to it? Anything you want here about autumn and pumpkin time and all of it?
I'm from California, where we only had 2 seasons, winter and mostly springish.
Yeah.
I did not appreciate the beauty of autumn until I moved to the East Coast, which is why I really love autumn. I love seeing the different colors. I love seeing the shift from summer to autumn to winter. It's really beautiful. And then I discovered something called snow. Have you heard of a snow? It's something that we didn't have in California. Snow. It's white like you. It's pure and clean. And so then we get snow. It's not dirty like me and brown. No. So we get snow. So I actually love autumn. I love autumn in the East Coast. My kids, every year we go to the pumpkin patch. It becomes like a festive thing. We carve the pumpkin, the whole costume with the kids. I actually loved pumpkin. I loved eating pumpkin, but I think we have overdosed on pumpkin and commercialized pumpkin to the point where since the last year, I'm like, I'm done. I think I need a 2-year break from pumpkin.
Oh, wow.
When Starbucks is doing pumpkin spice latte in July, and I'm just like, okay, let's just calm down.
Okay. I see where you're at. I see you feel unsafe, and I understand.
It's too much. It's like the immigrants. It's just too much. After a while. In moderate doses.
They're bringing their pumpkins.
I want to see them laboring. I don't want to see them in my Trader Joe's.
Well done. Very well done. As always, my friend. Thank you very much for joining me. So good.
That was great. Thank you, sir.
Well, there you go. Waj, go subscribe, everybody. Go subscribe to lefthook.substack.com. Listen to Democracy-ish. Let Waj know you heard him here on the show. Follow him on Twitter. And someday we hopefully will be doing something together, us, hopefully every week. We talk about it a lot. Maybe we can make that work after the election. Always love talking to Waj. Also, hopefully future Senator Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. And that's it. That's all I've got for you. I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout, everybody. John Carroll writes and performs the music. He is the best. Go buy and his music. Support him, johncarroll.org. And thank you for supporting me. Write a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Tell your friends. Go tweet about it. Go share it on Facebook. Every new listener and subscriber matters and can be a magical new person in our community. Okay, bumblebees, I'm done.
I think you're driving wheels in leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. ground and then stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.